Hey everyone, happy Saturday. Hope your weekend is shaping up as amazing as ours, especially since Diwali is right around the corner. I welcome you to this special Diwali edition of our webinar on blockchain for real estate. On the special note, as you can see, we have a new host, Amitsis, that's me. I'm Harshita Srivastava, and a content marketing enthusiast at heart. My experience spans across startups and SMEs alike, ranging from InstaOffice to Credily to Nularity. As you would already know, we are hosting Rohit Taneja, an IIT graduate serial entrepreneur whose vision is to solve some of the toughest problems that exist. So currently with BirthVenue, they're looking to develop and design new and revolutionary infrastructures with blockchain. So let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. Yep. So what's the question? What can I help you with?
Yeah. So let me start with the most widely asked question. What are the various use cases of blockchain that exist across real estate?
Sure. So real estate as a sector, has been very erratic in the recent past, and with good reasons. I mean, if you notice, there are two trends that are happening in parallel. One is there is a trend of mini globalization in India. What's happening is that a lot of these rural folks, right, and people from tier 2, tier 3 cities are now moving in droves to tier 1, right, and that is putting immense pressure on the tier 1 cities, right. We can see that in Bangalore, where we live. And then we can see that in Hyderabad, where we visited recently. So most of these recently tier 1 converted cities are facing very immense pressure to match the real estate development pace with the growth of population. And most of these are not able to do that. Right? And then there's also reasons why they're not able to do that. So if we go into a details of, let us say, of Bangalore and Hyderabad, especially the whole South region, what's happening is that there is the real estate prices skyrocketed in between, and then they plummeted all of a sudden, right? The reason for plummet one was, of course, the immense pressure that came in, right? So pressure of the population, and then not being able to match that particular demand, so the inventory fell short. That was the first touch point. But after that touch point, what happened was India, and in fact most of the world, has now entered into a state of recession. Right. So what's happening is that, yes, I mean, you have a lot of demand pent up, and people are willing to pay. But then when they see the rock bottom prices and the low pace of growth, they're saying, okay, what's happening here? Right. So they're not really willing to buy property now, even though they have the money.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the whole demonetization hit that came in, almost 2 years back now. So I think that these factors combined together have made real estate a very widely varying and a very erratic sector to be in, both for the buyers and sellers, right? So because of this pent-up demand, the unmatching inventory, right, and the variation in prices, what's happening is that technology is coming out to be a savior, right? So people are thinking, okay, can we use technology to solve some of the problems that real estate is facing beyond the basic market forces that already exist? So, for example, people are actually trying digital signatures for the first time, right? And this is new for real estate. Real estate has never seen digital signatures in the past. People have always been in the old classic, state of, okay, that we have to sign the documents physically and then do the notarization and then send it out, right? So digital signatures of property documents is number one, right? That is a major use case that we can now put on blockchain. So the way it will work on blockchain and how it will be different from the existing one is that initially what you used to do is that if you're doing a digital signature, you would do it on your computer or laptop, and then you would send it off, in an email or a packet to someone, right? To an authorization party, and they would authorize and reverse back, okay, that everything looks good. Here's the next step, right?
Right.
But ultimately, this document is still one single central place. So in order to make sure that, okay, nobody is defrauding anyone, people make multiple copies of the document. That's why there are so many photocopies flying out, right, when you're dealing with documents in real estate. But then again, as you can notice, that's not really very efficient. So better way will be that make the document as well digital, not just a signature, document as well, make it digital.
Right.
Then attach simple, a digital seal or a USB signature on it. Right? And then store it in multiple places. So you make one copy with yourself, one copy with the dealer, one copy with the bank if you're taking a loan, right? And one copy with the seller. So now you have these 4 copies of documents shared across in real time and in sync with each other. So if somebody updates, automatically everything gets updated. So now what happens is now you have a very interesting incentive-driven model, right? Where all the incentives of the people, of all the stakeholders have been taken into account.
Right.
In the sense that if the dealer wants to do some change, he can simply update his document, and the
Right.
rest of them can accept or reject it.
Right.
Right? So there's no need for reprinting, addendums, photocopies, and all these hard copies floating out. Right?
Right.
So this is one of the very major revolutionary use case here, right? Which is basically taking trust out of the human equation and saying, okay, now you don't need to trust a human being, you trust the system that is being used. So that's, I would say, a very, very big use case that's happening now. Yeah.
Great. So as you talk about trust, on the other hand, let's talk about fraud.
Yeah.
So what are the various fraud, use cases that exist in the real estate industry right now?
Sure.
And how can they be, how can blockchain make them go away?
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the major frauds that has been happening recently is the whole promise of delivery, right? A lot of people in Noida region and external Bangalore, East Bangalore and all, they have been caught up in this where what they did was they, very, I would say naively, they trusted, okay, that yes, the developer will deliver, on the promised date or maybe around about that date. And they gave the money advance and then they paid the EMIs and everything. And then ultimately realized a couple of years later, hey, we still don't have, the delivery, right? So we don't have a place to live. Now, in order to prevent that, it's important to understand why that happens first. So the reason that happens is again because we are trusting some human in the equation. Right? So we are trusting this company or developer in the equation, right? Which is basically saying that yes, we will do what we are saying.
Right.
Now that is not really, I would say, a very efficient way of doing things, obviously, because the moment you involve human beings and any organization that is formed by human beings, there is always a susceptibility of fraud. There's always a possibility of fraud happening.
Right.
Now, what blockchain does, and the way blockchain is solving this use case, and by the way, it has already been started in a couple of states, is what's happening is a lot of these developers and sellers, what they're doing is they're saying, okay, the classic documents thing that we discussed, that hey, initially we were signing on this document physically, right, and giving you this promissory note stating that okay, we will deliver, right. But now, instead of doing that, we'll tie a digital smart contract, right? And the smart contract is binding. Binding in the sense that, let us say, if you fail to deliver 24 months from now, right, automatically your money will be refunded back to you. Right? Now that is something which is difficult to do in a physical scenario because then in a physical scenario you really don't have any control, right? We can't just physically go in somebody's bank, right, and take the money. So in order to do that, the only way to do it is bind it through digital contract because technically your bank has the ownership of the money. Right. So you can use an escrow in between, which says, okay, that hey, your money is stored here. It will only be released to the developer once he gives you it, right? And in order to make it even more trustworthy, all the documents and the full logic train is decentralized. So you can see each and every node, each and every touch point of it, how it is flowing across the full spectrum. So that is how the whole fraud can go away. Right? Use an escrow, make it decentralized, make it binding using a smart contract.
Great. So what about the customers? How does it boost their confidence, their sentiment towards the real estate industry?
Right. It's a good question, actually. So one major thing that's happening in the consumer industry is that I think in this case, if you notice that removing the whole fraud is actually one of the most major incentives, right? The one we discussed right now. The second one that's happening is that now, since you already have the full logic trail and digital trail of documents, right? So technically you can, for a customer, you can actually define that, okay, my property is legally mine because, hey, it has crossed these many hands. This is exactly where the transaction happened. Right. And this is exactly how the money train followed. Right? So the question of ownership gets answered very simply, right? Which is actually the major cause of worry of many homeowners. Right? Some of the homeowners are always in consistent fear. Hey, what happens if somebody comes with a new document? If somebody tries to fake my documents, and those things. Right? The second thing which will happen is how do you really get liquidity in the system, right? Because a lot of homeowners, they don't buy homes in the fear of thinking that, okay, will there be a buyer when we sell it, right?
Yeah,
And
that's true.
what is the price at where it will sell, right? So um, all these questions are lingering, worrisome questions for them, and with good reason. So one of the major things that blockchain does in this case, and really infuses, confidence for the home buyers, is that it really makes the price transparent across the chain. That's one. So now you already know, okay, that this property has seen this particular price. This has touched this particular price point.
Right.
So through cycles of recession and prosperity in the economy, you can see how your own property's price is varying. Right? So say, for example, if you bought a property at 50 lakhs and you saw, okay, that 3 years later, when the economy was at a high, it was 80 lakhs, 90 lakhs, and now it's back to 50. So even though there might be a buyer who might be coming in, you can still show valid proof saying, okay, hey, at one point it was 80 lakhs. So I'm willing to sell you for 60 or 65, which is a discount from that, but a profit from me. So these kind of things will instill a lot of confidence in the home buyers. Yeah.
Great. So we've talked about buyers, we've talked about builders,
Yeah.
we've talked about customers,
Yeah.
we've talked about banks.
Right.
So how does blockchain help you create a meaningful network amongst all of them?
Sure. I think in terms of network, one of the major things that is actually getting solved, which we just discussed, is the first is paper trail, of course, right? And how do you really establish a digital paper trail, which ties up across the ecosystem, right? So now all these participants, the stakeholders, the banks, the builders, sellers, and the buyers, they're all connected through that single trail. Right? So there's no question of ownership, no question of tampering that can happen, right, in the documents. So that is the foundation of that network. Right? So building that digital trail. The next step of creating that meaningful network and taking it next level is when you actually add price dynamics and transactions on the network. So let us say we have a digital twin, right? But now when I want to really solve the problem of ownership and say do a transaction of my house across this particular network and sell it to a buyer on the network, I have to go through the bank, right? Because ultimately what's happening is that yes, the bank has to give me the loan. Right? So now the bank has to verify all my documents, right? And then ultimately decide on the price point, decide on the loan, parameters for me, and then publish a loan for me, right? At a particular interest rate. And then the buyer has to say, okay, yes, this is the price that I'm ready to buy, right? So getting all these people together, right? Getting all these people together and making sure that the digital trail complements, right, the price trail. So what I mean by that is your documents are saying a story, saying, okay, that yes, this is how the price changed over the past, and this is how the ownership changed over the past. And the price dynamics in the market outside may be different. Right. Because say the economy is in a recession. Right? So how do you really get those economic factors, the external economic factors of recession, growth, local factors, local comparative factors? For example, say a new developer is in town, right? So your price might change. Right now, you might be in a competition saying, okay, hey, I need to make it lower, right, to attract more customers. So, getting all of that is the responsibility of all these stakeholders. And again, since it functions like a decentralized network, every participant has the right to update the data, right? As long as it is in, the right consensus, right? So, I won't go in detail into consensus because that is more of technical aspects of blockchain. But yes, I mean, the idea is once all these aspects tie together, then your external factors and the internal factors, they come in beautifully. And then you have a very meaningful network of all these stakeholders.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So does this really help in the inclusion of the middle class and the lower class as well?
It will eventually. So right now, initially, I mean, the challenges that blockchain has is primarily in terms of the cost and the speed, right? So I won't say that, it is ready for everybody from onset, right? But the initial cost and the speed has to be offset by some. So, for example, say if we speak about this same meaningful network that we discussed, right? Here, all these participants will be bearing some of the cost per transaction, right? Because it's a B2B use case, right? So it's an enterprise use case, or rather, I should say it's a B2B2C, right? So we are doing it for them, for these participants, and these participants are solving it for the end consumer. So it's a B2B2C use case. But since there is a cost per transaction, so these participants will be the one that will offset it, both in terms of effort, that is the time taken per transaction, and the cost incurred. So that cost is not negligible right now. I mean, it's slightly high, on the higher side as compared to the existing, net banking and standard banking costs, or if you talk in terms of documents, the notarization cost, so to say. So once that comes down to a very small level, right, and really comes down to maybe a few cents on the dollar, right, a few cents on $100, that is where it starts making economic sense for the consumer, right? Because we don't want to pass on the cost to the consumer. But yes, as long as these participants are willing to bear that cost, right, for the benefits that they are getting, right, in terms of increased customers, increased revenue, lesser sales cycle, more trust, all these major factors. I think that's wonderful. So I think eventually, yes, it will happen, but it will take some time.
Great. In a nutshell, I think blockchain really solves the problem.
Absolutely.
So, what are you seeing any production level applications of this across India?
Yeah, good question. We are. So, not many people are aware of this, by the way. But what's happening is that in a couple of states like Rajasthan, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, a lot of developers have started adopting, like full net level capabilities, and people have actually started putting all their records, property records, on the chain, right? And these are, of course, private chains that we're talking about right now. Right? So these are chains that are shared across the network. So everybody in the network has permissions to see and permissions to edit to a certain capacity, depending on the type of participant. But yes, I mean, just to answer it succinctly, yes, production level we are seeing in a few states, but it's not, I would say, massive yet, because there are certain regulatory hurdles to be crossed. And most importantly, as you can notice, blockchain is really, really effective when all the participants are on it. Right? So you have to make sure that everybody has an incentive to be on it. That's what we're doing. Yeah.
Great. So how do you bring about that incentive?
Sure. So incentives really work in multiple ways. So here what we're doing is, and the way I think blockchain really makes incentives work for the real estate industry is, one is by lowering down the trust factor, of course, which we discussed, right? The whole issue of mistrust and frauds that's happening. Second is by accounting for speed. So one of the major problems that happens in real estate right now, apart from the trust and all which we discussed, is the speed of transaction. Right now it takes anywhere from a few days to a few weeks to even months to close a deal on a property, right? And again, if you go to the first principle, the basic reason for that exactly is the paper trail that's happening, right? You always have these massive documents that are flowing here and there, right? Between lawyers and auditors and all. So to circumvent that, ultimately you will have to, even do away with some class of lawyers, right? So this is a classic contrarian thing that will come in. Eventually, most of the lawyers and auditors in the real estate industry will go out of business. They will, technically they will shift away, right? Just like anybody evolves as the time comes, right? So they will have to develop new skills and they'll have to move away. But yes, I think when you bring that time of transaction from months to weeks to days and to minutes, right, you can see the magic happening, right? Because then what's happening is that buying and selling a property does not seem like a big dream, right? Because your cost value goes down, your trust value goes down, and your time value goes down, right? So then there's really no excuse, right, for a person not to engage, right? And that's where the incentives kick in.
Great. So I think all my questions are answered.
Great.
So let's move on to any questions that we have from the audience. Please feel free to use the chat option and let us know if you're thinking about something. I think we already have
we have a couple of questions. Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, I think we started with the first one. Yeah.
Additionally, it will be only intriguing when there would be smart contracts which would adjust the interest rates when builders delays into giving possession for the flats. The issue that is quite often in urban real estate nowadays. Comments?
Yeah, that's a good thing actually. So I think that goes back to the smart contracts that we were discussing, right? So the binding smart contracts. So what I discussed was maybe a very basic level 1 smart contract, right? Because what we are saying is, okay, it's more of a simple if-else condition, saying that yes, if the delivery gets missed by this date, then your money comes back or your escrow gets released, and so on and so forth, which is very basic. So I think what he's hinting at is a very dynamic level 2 or level 3 smart contract, right? Where not only your money comes back, but in general, if the delays happen in possession, delays happen in development, or say the market price changes of materials, right? Accordingly, your overall price can also fluctuate over time, or even your interest can fluctuate.
Right.
So say, for example, if you're taking a loan from the builder himself, or maybe somebody from outside like a bank or NBFC, right? Then that interest rate can fluctuate, right? Based on how the position is happening. So yes, absolutely. I think that will be pretty amazing to see, to happen in the industry. But yeah, I think eventually, again, that requires everybody in the ecosystem to be aligned with the way blockchain is functioning, and to be on the network, of course, by default. But yeah, I mean, if it happens, that's amazing.
Great. I'll move on to the next question. Now that India is moving into an economic slowdown, so naturally investment in real estate will go down, affecting liquidity. So do you think blockchain can help increase investment and liquidity in real estate in India and bring us closer to the $5 trillion economy goal?
Yeah. That's an ambitious goal that has been set. In fact, we ourselves did a lot of analysis on this, in terms of crowdfunding on real estate, and how do you really get more FDI into the economy. I mean, the basic point with this is, which we just touched upon briefly during the webinar, is the point of liquidity, right? That how do you really increase liquidity in the ecosystem, right? People don't want to tie down their savings and hard-earned money into an immovable asset. Right? That is the reason, actually, one of the main reasons why millennials and people like us, they don't really buy homes. Right? They just rent homes.
Right.
But then, I mean, the feeling of owning a home is something which is so real, and people want to have that dream. Right? And eventually they have that dream, but it's just that they push back that dream for a lot of time. So to answer this thing, yes, I mean, blockchain will actually be able to help a lot in terms of enabling FDI and crowdfunding, and increasing investments, increasing the money flow, basically, in the ecosystem. So the more money flow you have in the ecosystem, right, the better liquidity will be, because the more money flow, the more buyers, the more sellers, so to say. And that is something that India is eventually trying to do. In fact, FDI is something which has increased pretty drastically over the past few years in India, because of the good laws that India has brought about, and especially because of Modi, right? So I think that is fantastic for the whole economy as an overall. So you don't technically need blockchain just for FDI. The FDI can anyways happen without that. But yes, I mean, what blockchain will help you is that make sure that that FDI is accountable and it really reaches where it's supposed to reach, right? Which is something which is still hazy in this country, right? And not just FDI, but yes, in terms of a normal investor, like crowdfunding. Say, if you and I want to buy a commercial property down the road, right? We don't really have a legal proper way to buy, say, one unit, right, in minutes or seconds right now, right, in the country, or I think even anywhere. So some countries have initiated that. For example, one of our partners, Lilex, which is based in Belarus, they have actually tied up with the Belarus government, and they're actually allowing crowdfunding to come in, basically users or customers within Belarus to invest in the economy of Belarus. Right? So, for example, if the Belarus government is building a highway, as a user, I can invest in the highway and get dividends over it. Right? So I basically own a part of the highway, a small fraction, and I get some ownership of that. So that's pretty amazing. And that's something that is happening and eventually will give great liquidity. Yeah.
Great. Moving on to the next question now. What do you guys think about blockchain-based crowdfunding investment platform for real estate project? I think this is just what we answered. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. What is the electricity consumption required per transaction completion? And if some participants' computers are switched off, would it cause delays?
Yeah, so that's more around the blockchain infra. Right now, I mean, I don't have an exact number for you in terms of how much electricity is required. But yeah, it is. I mean, if you're running like a very complicated proof of work algorithm, then yes, it is substantial. And that's why all the Bitcoin miners and all, they have pretty big mining rigs just to mine Bitcoin and keep the transactions going. So if you really boil it down to the fundamentals, it depends on what architecture you're using, right, in blockchain. So if it is proof of work, then yes, absolutely, there is a lot of computing involved, and your normal run-of-the-mill computers cannot do it. You definitely need dedicated servers for that. The scale and computing power purely depends on how much computing firepower you need or the transaction needs. For example, right now, Bitcoin mining rigs pretty much occupy anywhere from a small basement to multiple floors, in terms of building size, right? So you can imagine the level of, supercomputers that are there being used just for this purpose. However, this is also a classic. I think what some people derive from this question is that means blockchain is using a lot of power. That also means blockchain is harming the economy, or maybe leading to global warming and all that stuff, right? But that's not true, right? Because what happens is that eventually, if you look at the power that is being consumed here, is actually residual power in most of the cases, not in all. For example, some of the mining rigs which are there in Russia and all, they actually set up near dams, right? And the residual power from the dams, right? Basically, the power that is being left off or getting wasted, right, which is not technically being used, is being pulled up into the mining rigs, right?
Right.
Again, not true for all, but yes, in most of these cases, that is what happens, right? In China as well. So many of these supercomputing rigs, right, that are being there, that are actually connected to residual power from power plants, nuclear plants, more from hydro actually, right? To answer the second question, if the computers are switched off, where it cause delays. I mean, if you boil it down to the basics, it's like if in 100 nodes, 4 nodes are off, will it matter? Not really, because as long as you have a healthy, stable network of the other 96 nodes, right, it won't make a difference. But yes, I mean, if out of 100 nodes, 99 are off, then yes, you have a problem, right? So it depends on where the majority is, right, and is the majority active on the chain or not. And it's not really about computers per se. I mean, computers are maybe just a synonym here for the node. I mean, technically, your node can be anything. Right? It could be a computer, it could be a smartwatch, anything which has a processing power, computing power, and can execute, and can behave as a small host, right, will function as a node. So in the future, almost every gadget in your home which has computing power, like your laptops, your computers, your TVs, your phones, your washing machines, if they have, your fridges, they can behave as peers. Right? So I mean, there are multiple possibilities out there.
Great. So I think we will take one last question before we sign off, due to time constraint. How can a title insurance company in the real estate industry benefit from the blockchain technology? And how soon can blockchain technology be used to create and store smart contracts for legal documents with, I think these are two separate questions. We'll just take the first one.
Sure. Yeah. So titles, I think if I understand correctly, it's basically, title insurance company in the real estate, right? So what they're saying is, let us say I want to ensure that, okay, this is, the ownership of this particular home, right? And there's a company that is insuring the title of that, right? Now what happens is the real value in insurance comes in, or the real magic, I would say, comes in when you solve for the pain point, major pain point for the customer, right? So in this case, the major pain point for the customer in insurance is really, one, the paperwork. Right? Can you simplify the paperwork for the customer? Right? Which means basically that instead of the customer reading hundreds of lines of documents, right, which nobody wants to read, and that's why most people don't read, right? They just sign the insurance policy and send it on the right. So nobody wants to go through that. But beyond simplifying paperwork, another level of magic that will happen is that in this title insurance game, solving for claims and adjudication. Right? A lot of these disputes, a lot of these fraud claims, fake claims, they lead to trust issues, right? Which goes back to the first question that we were discussing. And this happens predominantly more in the insurance industry, much more than actually any other industry in the market. I mean, in fact, if you notice, this is a very surprising fact which most people don't realize. In fact, I'll ask you actually a question. Let us say I give you two options, right? One is, so where do you think is the most money lost in the capital markets, right, in investing? Is it A, through frauds, or is it B, through stupid investing?
I think I would have to say frauds.
No, it's stupid investing. Yeah. So people think that, okay, I was like, because obviously that is something that's glamorized, right, and mentioned so much in the media.
Yeah.
People think that, okay, it's like there's always Chinese hackers looking to steal my money, or there's somebody across the road trying to hack my Wi-Fi and all.
That is true.
Which happens, but not that often. So honestly, it's just that people are not aware where they're investing the money, and that is what leads to most of the money losses in the market. So same ways goes here as well. If you look at the overall industry, financial industry is actually much more secure than what people think it to be.
Right.
It has evolved by leaps and frogs over the past 20 years, 30 years, right? I mean, if you go back in the 80s and 90s, those bankers, they did not really have a sense of the mouse as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think an example which I was discussing sometime, right?
Yeah.
So people did not really know how a mouse functions. I mean, and these were like the CTOs of MasterCard at that time. So you can imagine how much farther we have come ahead. And actually the level of frauds have gone down. So, but insurance is still one case where a lot of frauds happen. And again, the primary reason is because people are really not sure of what they're getting into when they're signing on that paper. Because if you go down again to the first principle, is because paperwork is too complex.
Right.
So yes, I mean, to answer it succinctly, blockchain will solve it magically, right? I mean, through establishing paper trail, of course. There are steps involved. I mean, it's not an easy step. It's not an easy process, but if done right, yes, it will eventually wipe off all these frauds, all these accountability issues.
Can't wait for a world like that.
Yeah.
On that note, I think we will, close down on the questions. If there are any of them, you can definitely write to BirthVenue offline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
you can write to us on Twitter at BirthVenue, or of course, we always reach you on email, admin@birthvenue.in. Facebook page is always open. So yeah, happy to answer your questions whenever they want.
Be sure to follow us on all our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Yeah.
We'll be happy to answer any more residual questions that got left out. Also, a very, very, very happy Diwali to all of you. I hope you have an amazing blast of a time from all of us at BirthVenue.
Right. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.